Yeah, so this is kind of a life lesson that just happened, and not personally with myself, but with my daughter. And I'm kind of a proud dad in this moment because it could have gone sideways real fast. But she just turned 16, so this was 2 days ago. Monumental moment. Happy birthday to my oldest. You're making me feel old. But we went to the DMV. Went through that process. Obviously, as a parent, it's a very different than when I remember it as a kid, and it still was stressful as an adult going through the process and making sure she had everything. We had to drive. It was kind of a far drive, so a lot of time to talk through the tests and going through that process. So it took up a lot of our time through the entire day. And she went to go get her test. For me, I was feeling extremely helpless in the situation because I didn't have any control over that. I didn't enjoy that process at all. However, she went and took her driver's test, and they went out to take it, and it should take probably a good 20 minutes for it to be completed. Well, the gentleman from the test who was administering it came back into the DMV 5 minutes later. And I was like, that's not good. So he came over to me. He knew I was her father and explained as to what she did incorrectly and that she did not pass. Of course, I knew what that was going to mean when I got back into the car with my daughter, and you can imagine what the scene was.
Yeah.
Of course, she was extremely disappointed because what she did not pass was something that she was really good at, which was parallel parking. So I know not all states have to take that part of the assessment, but here in Texas, that's something that they require. So it is a strength of hers, but for whatever reason, maybe it's nerves, maybe just being in a foreign situation. The setup was very, very different than what we practiced on.
Tones are different than cars.
Yeah.
It's different.
You should have saw this too. The setup was very interesting. Anyways, I digress. She did not pass. So, the whole ride home, a lot of tears, trying to kind of like calm her down and really make a plan moving forward of like, what's that going to look like? Because of course, for her worry was, I'm not going to get a license for a really long time. We got together with her, made a plan. We found a place the following day. The next day, she wanted to take the test, reassess. She wanted to go. She knew the content. She knew she had the skills. She wanted to go again. Here in Texas, you can do that. So we signed her up. The next day, she passes, right? She goes through flying colors, not an issue. She nailed the parallel parking, right? So the lesson here, right, is, and I tell her this all the time, is we never lose. We either learn or we win, right? Like there's only two things that can happen if you had that mindset of reassessment. And so I just was thinking, as far as the life lesson, yes, it's good for her to fail in the moment, to say, okay, this does not define me. I'm going to make a decision to, do it again.
Yeah.
The other piece, though, is like, how does that translate to school? Because, when we did standards-based grading, we did reassessment, so many times I heard teachers push back about how, oh, that's not real world. That's not real world. But this is a great lesson on, no, there is reassessment.
Actually, that is how it works.
It happens all the time. Like, I'll be honest, when I took my teaching license test in Minnesota, it was really, really hard. You had to take 12 essays. You had to do 50 multiple choice questions, and you were timed for 2 hours. So for me, I knew the content like the back of my hand, but I didn't pass. Why? Because it was more about me trying to get through the test in the allotted amount of time versus me actually telling the state that I knew the information. So I failed. And so I had to go and reassess. So I technically, if I was going to be the same standard as what some of the teachers that I worked with before, I wouldn't have been a teacher, which means I wouldn't have been an administrator based on the fact that I was able to reassess. However, the state said, yes, if you fail, you can go back and prove that you know the content. And so next time I took it, of course I did better because I knew that I was really against the clock versus me putting the content down. There's a lot of opportunities out there in real life as adults to show the knowledge that we have. So why wouldn't we do that in the schools instead of making everything high stakes when it really doesn't need to be?
Well, and I think fun story, I actually failed mine the first time too, parallel parking. And unlike Dave, who just stated that he will literally drive blocks around to not have to parallel park.
Oh, I do the same thing.
I can parallel park blindfolded. But when I was 16, and I actually, so crazy part, like I practiced driving in my dad's car, or well, it was our car that he had gotten for like the kids, like an old car. It was like an old Lumina, I think. And then we had gotten a new one that I was going to be able to drive, and it was the first time driving the car. I can't remember which car it was. It was the first time me driving a car, and like that was what my parents told me. They're like, "Well, it was a new car, so like you didn't know." Like I barely tapped the cone of the mirror, and it like wobbled and fell. And I'm like, "But that's a fail. Like you don't get an option." And I went back in. I don't think it wasn't the next day, but it was within, I think it was only a week or something. It wasn't even a week. I don't think I got to go back in and take it again. And I think a big piece of this is that she had all the skills and the knowledge to pass it. She just didn't. So if you put that in your students in your classroom, like I'm thinking about my daughter right now who struggles with the timed math test.
Sure.
She knows it because we sit there and do it. We do flashcards, we go through the test, whatever, and she knows it. She doesn't miss anything. But then when she gets time, she fails it. Like because it gets in her head, she freaks out. She doesn't do well with it. And she's worried about the time, not about the knowledge. And it wasn't until her teacher, like we had a conversation, her teacher's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I communicated incorrectly. Like this is not crucial.
Right.
It's just for me to know where you're at. Take your time. I don't care if I have to write that you didn't get it done on time. That's okay. That's just how that assessment works. It's all good." And like she knows it. She just can't do it in the time frame or whatever, or that messes with her. And like for your daughter, like she knew how to pass that. She just didn't the first time. Like it's silly to think that that's just you get one chance and done.